Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I just need Houston to kick another field goal. It's not going to happen tonight.
They're down 15 points in the middle of the fourth quarter. There's no reason they would ever kick. They just went for it on 4th and 15. This night's not happening for you, bud.
I'm trying for a perfect run in one of the hell leagues. It's not gonna.
Yeah, so am I. It just ended with Nico Collins' injury.
This is unfair to both of us.
Yeah, truly, we are the victims here.
Yeah, it's not CJ Stroud dropping back 30 steps on 4th and 15, struggling to find anyone, and then his only option is a running back. No.
Nico Collins, when you got hurt, were you thinking of me? Because I think you weren't. Me and my perfect season?
Nope. This is why you can't go perfect in the Hell League. This is, well, for many reasons, really.
For many reasons.
I thought I caught a break. I was playing a guy who had a. Oh, come on! I was playing a guy who was who started a kicker who got 0 points today, or yesterday rather. When the Raiders got zeroed, when the Raiders got shut out, I was like, oh, perfect! I have an opportunity. Nope. Everything sucks.
I was up against Blake Group. I don't know, and he got -3 points. So I was like, I think I got a shot here, but then I got -6 from Jake Elliott because I wrongly assumed that a kicker would make all their kicks against Minnesota, I guess. But then I got 40 burgered by Jonathan Taylor and 50 burgered by the Los Angeles defense. What in the world? This league is so stupid.
The Hell League is a league of contrasts. And with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We've got plenty to talk about. We will be reviewing the Eagles game. We will spend a considerable amount of time discussing what exactly Carson Wentz. Oh, that's a pick. Sorry. We're just doing this live now. I just want Fairbairn to kick right now.
There's no reason he would kick, because you just need 2 points, right? Even if they got 2 touchdowns, one of those is going to be a 2-point conversion, and there's a fight. This is exciting.
No one has ripped their helmet off and used it as a weapon yet.
Actually, this is what you need. You need the extra point and the 2-point conversion, force overtime, and then he kicks a game-winning field goal.
Yeah, you know what?
That's your path.
I'm fine with that. It's election night. It's 3:00 in the morning. Most of the states have reported in.
Can still win. Here's how.
We're not conceding anything right now. Tell the supporters we'll revisit this in the morning, but there is a
We're
path.
Pouring through the league constitution to see what our options are.
I was going to say stop the vote, but no, keep them going. Keep them going.
Yeah, keep them going. Keep counting.
All right, so ignoring what is happening in front of us, this is why we don't record while games are going on typically.
But there's a doubleheader Monday night, and instead of the staggered doubleheader, they started this one at 9 Central, so we had to.
Yeah, I hate all of this. So we've got the Eagles game. We'll be discussing Carson Wentz a considerable amount this evening. So strap in for that. And we'll be discussing exactly why the defense allowed a hilarious amount of passing yards. So we'll also be doing the mailbag as well, but thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can head over to patreon.com/NorseCode for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the Discord, the bonus episodes, all of that. You can also head over to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or norsecode.threadless.com for any number of wonderful pieces of Norse Code merchandise. Shirts, baby onesies, flags, all of that, skateboard deck. Special thank you on Patreon over to Jim Cran for signing up. Thank you very much to Jim Cran. All right, let's get into the episode and let's talk about what happened on Sunday against the Eagles. this was a loss. This was a game that, if I can paraphrase your article on Wide Left, it never really seemed close, despite the score. And Carson Wentz proceeded to make mistakes that I would expect a rookie quarterback to make. In particular, a pass that should have gone to CJ Ham for a touchdown.
Well, I don't know about touchdown, but he did miss 2 consecutive passes to CJ Ham. He did miss a pass in the flat to Jordan Addison that probably would have gone for a touchdown. He missed a completion, which is always a fun sentence, to Jordan Addison. Prior to that should have gone for a touchdown. And then he also missed on the same drive a different pass to Jordan Addison in the end zone that obviously would have been a touchdown. So he missed Jordan Addison 3 times on the same drive for a touchdown. He missed CJ Ham twice when Ham was first in the progression. Greg Olson was very quick to point this out, which is how you know he's a good commentator. He made a number of mistakes.
Yeah. Let's that's the nicest way to put it.
Look, I was always right about this guy. This guy stinks. I hate him. I've always hated him. I was right to hate him. And
there was a tweet that somebody had posted about how Carson Wentz may be the only or maybe the first quarterback in history to get PTSD from an ACL injury. Like, it just, like, all of a sudden just lose any bit of momentum he had from that season, and it's never coming back.
The thing that makes me really mad about Carson Wentz is JJ McCarthy. That's the thing that makes me mad. If McCarthy had just played better, I wouldn't be in this Torment Nexus right now, right? Like, I wouldn't be twisting and turning with the wind as these really substandard performances have forced me to consider the possibility of advocating for this fraud, right? The fact that even after this truly bad game, disastrous game, which it should be said he was worse in the first half than the second half, and that is coloring our perceptions. Despite that, he still has not had a game with a worse success rate than either of McCarthy's games, or a worse EPA per play than either of McCarthy's games, or a worse total EPA, or I believe a worse passer rating. The fact that that is true makes me so mad about everything, because you can have these truly awful performances and still end up in a spot where you're like, okay, well, from a production standpoint, like, that's mean, actually. That's mean to me in particular.
The whole signing of Carson Wentz just seemed mean to you personally. Like, you absolutely,
like, if they were going to do it, just at least prepare me, right? Do it in the off season. And also, what's great about that, what's fantastic if you do that, is then he gets to learn the offense. Isn't that crazy that he could do that? Maybe isn't that so cool that your backup quarterback could maybe learn the offense? Have you thought about that?
So, obviously, Carson Wentz was playing quarterback, and if we're looking at this, there had been whispers as to whether or not McCarthy was going to be ready. He was listed as the third string emergency quarterback behind Brosmer. Man, there are moments when he is playing, when he is in a groove and, like, streaky as hell, and it looks way different than the panic we can see when he is throwing that weird little sidearm thing that ended up getting called for intentional grounding when he had receivers open.
That was crazy.
I don't know that I've ever seen that at the professional level.
It was truly nuts. I don't know. I don't know how to answer this one.
Not even Nathan Peterman. Not even McNabb on his worst series with the Vikings when he was throwing worm burners. And it's frustrating because we know what. Here's just side note. Are we sure that McCarthy is bad? It turns out the Falcons defense is good.
Well, okay, it does turn out that Falcons defense is good, but like again, this is okay. So I'm just gonna go off on like a little tangent. So this is I just want to be very, very clear here. This is not an argument where I'm saying that McCarthy shouldn't start, as soon as possible. This is not me saying that. But instead to kind of make sure that everyone is dealing with the same reality, which is that it is really difficult to overstate how poorly McCarthy has played. Because if any measure that you take a look at, it's not just that McCarthy is last in the NFL in these measures. Although it is that case, right? It is that he is last by quite a significant distance, that the way that he is played has been so poor that it sets the boundaries, the parameters for whatever chart you're choosing to create. The distance between him and like 30th best tends to be, in whatever metric that you choose, the distance between like 30th and 15th. It is enormous how poorly he is played from a production standpoint, right? Which is different than, when we take a look at like traits-based analysis and stuff like that. But it has been really frustrating to try and communicate this effectively because, vocally, you can just say he's played poorly. And we've seen a lot of quarterbacks play poorly, right? We've seen a lot of, especially in Vikings land, we've seen a lot of really, really bad quarterback play, right? But when you think about like the rest of the, when you think about like all of these quarterbacks that are struggling, Justin Fields, really great example of a quarterback that's struggling. He got benched this week, right? You think about, Tyrod Taylor, who replaced him. Like any of these quarterbacks that have played really poorly, McCarthy has played worse than it. Think of a quarterback that you think is absolutely dookie, absolutely awful, right? Last year's Anthony Richardson. Well, actually, I should probably check on last year's Anthony Richardson, but think of a quarterback that you think has just been awful. Sam Darnold with the Jets. McCarthy's played worse than that guy, right? Like it's like Zach Wilson, maybe worse than that territory. Again, it's just 2 games, right? I'm not saying you got to bench McCarthy. There's no. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is nobody has. I shouldn't say nobody. It is really difficult to make sure that people are confronting this reality because they don't seem to understand what people are saying when we say that he has played really poorly, because they get this kind of idea that he's playing at like a Spencer Rattler level, right? Maybe getting this idea that he's playing at a, okay, there's some pretty bad quarterbacks out there, but playing at a Jake Browning level or a Geno Smith this year level or a Tua Tagovailoa level or a Bryce Young level or whatever. But no, he is the worst quarterback by a significant distance. So if you take a look at, so I'm taking a look at every quarterback with 50 dropbacks this year, or 60 dropbacks, right? That's what McCarthy has. He ranks 39th of all of those quarterbacks, right? And there's 39 of them, right? The distance between him and Cam Ward at 38th, mind you, is, let's see, 354 minus 227, 127, right? And we add that to, or we subtract that from 227. That's the distance between him and Joe Flacco, who just had an outstanding game. And the distance between Joe Flacco and the next guy, or it should be plus 127, is the same as the distance between him and 26 Spencer Rattler. We talk about how bad Spencer Rattler is. Dog, they are not in the same zip code. They're not playing the same sport. And Spencer Rattler is bad. He's 26th. Right. So when we talk about the things that McCarthy has to improve, right, and I totally get that there's a kind of a lot going on there. It is a huge margin to overcome. Now, Josh Allen overcame this margin. Josh Allen had one of the biggest leaps in quarterback play. And this is actually maybe an appropriate comparison, not because he's on a Josh Allen trajectory. We got to be careful to understand that that is a rare trajectory, and hopefully that's the one that he's on, right? But rather, when Josh Allen made an enormous leap of play in his play from his rookie year to his second year, one of the biggest leaps we've ever seen from rookie year to second year, he was still like the worst quarterback in the NFL. And that's the distance I'm talking about. A historic jump in the quality of his play from his rookie year to his second year, and he was still the worst quarterback in the NFL. Now, obviously, he continued. Now he's one of the best. But that's kind of where you have to live when you're making this kind of argument, right? Carson Wentz outproduced in this game where he was so bad that his accurate passes were inaccurate, right? He was significantly outproduced, right? So if we take a look at the EPA per play that the Falcons, have allowed this year, right? They've had some really good games. They had a really great game week 6, 2 weeks ago. They had an outstanding game in week 3, right? But if you take a look at the EPA per play, it's not close. Not the same zip code. Minus 0.51 EPA per play from McCarthy in week 2, minus 0.11 in week 6, right? And that's a really good defensive performance. It's truly a significant and enormous hurdle to overcome. So I'm looking at like every Vikings quarterback with 10 dropbacks in a single game. I'm taking a look at some of these worst performances, right? Wow, I forgot how good Teddy Bridgewater was against the Chicago Bears in 2015. I'm sorry, I was like looking at every quarterback performance going all the way back to the year 2000, right? So we've got JJ McCarthy as against the Bears as the 14th worst and against the Falcons as the 16th worst quarterback performance in Vikings history since the year 2000. So he's beaten by Jaren Hall, number 1, 2023 start Jaren Hall. Great. He's not close to Jaren Hall. But where he's close to is Dobbs against the Bears, Ponder against the Seahawks, Tavares Jackson against the Packers in 2006, Christian Ponder against the Bears again, this time in 2013. Like, that's the territory. Like, you remember some of these games, right? Kirk Cousins' 2020 game against the Colts, Sam Bradford's 2017 game against the Bears when his knee was still doing whatever it was doing. Those are the quarterback performances that are in the same zip code as his, right? Do you remember how mad you were about Sam Darnold in week 18 against the Lions? Almost the exact same EPA per dropback. So I'm not saying that McCarthy can't improve. I'm not even saying that there are quarterbacks that can't have games like this that don't end up being good quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins is a good example of multiple examples of Kirk Cousins on this list, right? But you go through this list and it's mostly not people like Kirk Cousins. It's Spurgeon Wynn, Matt Castle, Christian Ponder, late career Brad Johnson, Jaren Hall, Tavares Jackson. Those are the people on the list that aren't Kirk Cousins, right? So it is really difficult to envision a this year performance from McCarthy. And I don't think he'll play that poorly again, right? But it's really difficult to envision a this year performance from McCarthy that puts you in substantially positive territory. And that's kind of why I've been talking about it like this, because I think the degree to which we've talked about the differences in these performances hasn't really fully captured what the production has been. And there have been so many differences, right, in what they've had to deal with. But I think the thing that's really bothering me now, and the reason that I just went off about this, is that there is some perception somehow that Carson Wentz has been handed a better hand, has been dealt a better hand than JJ McCarthy. Like, yeah, obviously McCarthy didn't have Christian Darrisaw. That's huge. He didn't have Jordan Addison. We just saw in this game. That's huge, right? Jordan Addison had a great game. We'll talk about that in a second. That's enormous. But he also didn't have Blake Brandel blocking for him. He had a real, actual center who knows how to play the position, right? And for most of the games, he had Donovan Jackson, right? Carson Wentz didn't have Donovan Jackson for most of those games, right? And Carson Wentz didn't have Brian O'Neill for a lot of those games. Like, that's so much worse than having Justin School at left tackle. Blake Brandel is worse at center than Justin School is at left tackle by an enormous margin, right? I just looked up all of the quick pressures under 2.5 seconds that quarterbacks have had to deal with this year. This was the 7th most of any individual game this year. Any quarterback has had to deal with quick pressures under 2.5 seconds. And almost all of them came from Blake Brandel up the center, right? Up the middle. McCarthy has never had a game with pressures arriving that quickly, despite having a backup left tackle. So in most, the time to pressure for McCarthy has actually been longer for him than it has been for Wentz, right? And so we talk about like, oh, they had so many different struggles. The offense was called differently for Wentz, and that's true, and that's an important consideration, that the offense wasn't designed in a way that accommodated the problems with the offensive line when McCarthy was in, and those changes only occurred when Carson Wentz was in. But there were still quick strike options in a lot of the elements of that offense, and McCarthy was still hesitating. He was still not throwing where he needed to throw. We're talking about like Carson Wentz missing CJ Ham in the flat. You can't do that, right? You cannot do that. That is high school level stuff, right? Maybe that's unfair, but that's like early college level stuff, right? You can't do that. But here's the problem. McCarthy would still do that too, right? On the plays where he did have quick options. And I'm not saying he didn't really have like a rollout play action like Carson Wentz did. Like that's a nice feature to the offense that maybe should have been there in weeks 1 and 2. But he had quick options that were early in the progression that he hesitated too much and declined on. And so we're asking him to make really significant leaps. And now we're at the point where, because the floor for Carson Wentz isn't as high as it needs to be, we have to take a ride on the roller coaster. And I just want people to know that that's what the decision is. It's a roller coaster. It's not because McCarthy is better. You know, we're watching this game, and I see a lot of people in my mentions say, man, how could it get worse than Carson Wentz? And I just feel like I do this every year, where I tap the sign and say, it can always get worse. I promise you, it can always get worse. You can always end up with Josh Freeman. Always. You can always end up with Jaron Hall. Oh, it can always get worse. Carson Wentz played poorly. He did not play like the worst quarterback in the NFL this week, and that should terrify you, because it is possible for the Vikings to play the worst quarterback in the NFL in a particular week. And he didn't do that, which is crazy and entirely possible. So I want to put that out there. Now we could talk about how ridiculously poorly, well, we did already talk about how ridiculously poorly Carson Wentz played, but like it was a disaster class. In his good plays were bad, and his bad plays were outstanding. Like, how do you miss a guy that open, or how do you decline? You are looking directly at this guy, right? The Jordan Addison near touchdown in the flat, or not the flat, it's like a flare out. You were looking directly at Jordan Addison. He's first in your progression. There's acres of space in front of him. What visually is your cue that you decided to move on? I am so fascinated. I'm so curious by this decision that you made, that you decided, nah, not for me, right? Why? I don't know. But even like the blown coverage to Addison, that should just been, we should have had the conversation about the other Addison misses, because that should have just been a touchdown. It should have been, what are you doing? He's wide open, and he just had to field a punt for no reason. And on the pick 6, I should say, there were 2 picks. On the pick 6, I'm going to say that's more on Brandel than on Carson Wentz, right? I don't want to disaggregate, who's responsible for what in an unkind or unfair, well, unkind maybe, but in an unfair way, right? It would be unfair to say that is primarily on Carson Wentz, but it would be fair to say a lot of the disasters were, right? Subsequently, he threw a backwards pass that was somehow inaccurate, so it turned out to be a fumble going back. Like, what are you doing, man? That's crazy. Like, I remember when Josh Allen was a rookie, and he would just miss screen passes, and you're like, those are the easiest passes in the NFL. I'm saying that as if I can't do that, obviously. It requires some level of skill. But the level of skill that you would expect an NFL starting quarterback to have, you would think that he could do that. Like
1 point down.
Oh my God, you got the extra point.
Yes.
Why didn't they go for 2 then?
Because the Houston Texans are allergic to good football. That's
you have to know whether or not. Oh my, that's so. Because then you can go for. Oh my God, you have to know, because when you score again and you chew up clock, you don't know if you. This is an analytics discussion that's been had a million times. Okay, so So yeah, Wentz was he was drifting in the pocket. When he throws on the run, it is awful. He scrambled well. Got to give him that. Got to give him. He doesn't know how to protect his body. You got to let him have that one.
He saw Joe Flacco on Thursday and went, "Why can't I do this too?"
Yeah, right. Yeah. Remember who said it? Was it Chet Hanks who's like, "It's white boy summer. It's white boy fall, baby." Just scramble to your heart's content. See what happens.
Mm-hmm. What's really frustrating is this should have been, based on how well he was cooking, this probably could have been the Jordan Addison career game, where he just ended up with like 200, 250 yards.
Yeah,
based on the fact
250.
Yeah, it was. So why
that wasn't the only drive he missed Jordan Addison?
No, it just kept happening. So why was Jordan Addison getting so open?
I mean, part of it, of course, I think is that you're dragging attention away with like Justin Jefferson, right? Like that's a big part of it. But I think a lot of it is just the defense, like the Vic Fangio defense doesn't create a lot of opportunities for the defense to control the matchups. It's entirely kind of dependent on the offense to do those things. Man, can Fairbairn not kick out the end zone? Like you can't let them waste clock like that.
He did kick it. He got into the end zone. They decided to still go.
No. He got into the end zone, but you have to kick it out the back so that there's no clock.
No.
Yeah. Because he just decides to return it. The field position doesn't matter for the Seahawks. They just want to waste clock. So the Fangio defense doesn't create a lot of opportunities for you to create matchups, and so you like sometimes you just get Cooper DeJean, who is a really good defensive back. We saw, how we broke up that pass to Justin Jefferson. That's really excellent stuff. But, if we're going to pick the fastest corner on that roster, it's not him, right? Or you get Keely Ringo because it's Keely Ringo, right? You can't really control that. And so the Vikings took advantage of that because even though Jefferson's a better receiver, right, Addison has more speed, it seems like. And so you take advantage of that and you create these mismatches. And as they kind of shift safeties over to cover Jefferson, because they know as soon as they kind of stop doing that, Jefferson's going to go off. You create a lot of space available for Addison. But also, I want to commend Addison. It's not just what Jefferson was doing. And it's not just that he's fast. He's grown a lot as a route runner, right? Maybe not maturity-wise, but as a route runner, he's grown pretty significantly. He does a better job sinking into his breaks. He does a better job kind of setting up defensive backs, because the thing about route running is that you're telling a story and then you're lying. You're telling a really fanciful lie, right? And you need a lot of storytelling technique, and that comes with the way that you run routes, because your routes signal things and then those things are lies. You break that signal and you go in another direction. It's actually really difficult to do that without signaling what you're actually going to do, and he has expanded his capacity to do that. So that was a pretty big part of it, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think the Vikings understood that this was probably going to be an Addison game just because of the ability to control the matchups. And they decided if it wasn't going to be an Addison game, that Jefferson was probably going to end up being open. So yeah, a more accurate pass to Addison would have gotten you some yards on that first drive. Maybe not throwing that pick to Addison. Or if you were going to throw that, which that was a bad throw. Lead him upfield as opposed to forcing him down, which, I mean, that's a tough throw because you're throwing on the run, but maybe that should have been a clue not to throw it. But if you are going to throw it, you got to throw it ahead of him because the DB is undercutting it. So, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of not created plays, but a lot of well understood mismatches that the Vikings were exploiting in this game.
Let's talk about TJ Hawkinson for a moment, who was putting up some yards there and had his touchdown call reversed. And he seemed miffed on as to why. He didn't understand, because he had two refs right in front of him say that, according to his what he had said in the press, that he had two refs right in front of him call touchdown. So what exactly happened there?
Well, I mean, I think the review got it correct. It's just, I understand, right, his frustration, which is when you have two people on the field immediately signal something, and then it takes a while, and then it gets taken away from you. It's really frustrating. But he didn't complete the process of the catch. He let go of the ball after it hit the ground. That is not a catch. to me. And my initial reaction was that it was a catch, and I was really upset they were taking time to review it. And then I take a look at it on replay, and it's like, oh no, the rules analyst is right. That probably shouldn't be a catch. So yeah, and the thing is, it was an unnecessarily difficult catch, right? He has to jump out and reach for it when he is already open in the end zone. Whose fault is that? Carson Wentz, right? That's why that's not a touchdown, is because it was an unnecessarily difficult attempt at a catch. I understand why Hawkinson was upset with the way that was officiated, but ultimately they got the call correct, and they got it correct kind of quickly. Like, it was delayed, and that's kind of annoying. But I think from a review perspective, like, that was, you review all scoring plays, you review all turnovers, right? That was the right move, and it was just really frustrating that it had to play out like that, because you see the call in the field reversed. And that's kind of why the NFL doesn't make every call reviewable, in part anyway, because getting the call on the field reversed undermines, first of all, the authority of and the credibility of the refs on the field as they manage the game in so many ways that are not just penalty count. But also because it creates this sense of frustration when somebody physically there tells you one thing, and then somebody whose face you can't see tells you another thing. But that was the correct call. It just kind of sucks.
Did that just happen? Did the Seahawks just get gifted a personal foul from the Texans to end this game?
Let's go.
He jumped over the top and tried to rip off his helmet.
Yeah, I probably don't do that. Is that Tim Settle Jr.? Yeah, yes. Don't do that, man.
And
Mike McDonald's like, yeah, you're right. That's a penalty.
That is how my perfect season ends. That's unfortunate. I hate. So, as far as the offensive line and the run game was concerned, we say it was there, but how close are we to, I guess, having the offensive line that we were supposed to?
I mean, we still have to worry about whether or not Ryan Kelly's ever going to come back from IR. That's the biggest question mark right now, because you've got Christian Darrisaw back, you've got Brian O'Neill back, you've got Will Fries, you've got Donovan Jackson back. And Jackson didn't, like, we would probably be talking about Jackson a little bit more if Blake Brandel didn't suck so hard. I don't know how else to put it. Didn't have such a bad game that it overwhelms everything else. Jackson had a pretty poor game, I would say. But it just isn't comparable. So you're probably not getting Ryan Kelly back anytime soon if he's on IR, and they're not talking about it very much. So you have to figure out if Joe Hubert can do it or if Michael Juergens can do it. Like, Michael Juergens, I don't know why, they didn't, like, I guess Blake Brandel played well against the Browns. But like, playing well in a small sample is, given the context of like the fact that he never played center before, you play reasonably well in a small sample. It's tough for me to be that confident that that's going to hold up versus, like with the McCarthy situation, if you play really poorly in a small sample, well, I don't think that's going to hold up, but I think it's easier to kind of end up with a good game here or there if you're not really good than to end up with a catastrophically bad game if you're really good, if that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know why they stuck with him. They really should have, like, Michael Juergens was healthy. He played. I thought it was one snap. PFF says 2. We have a mailbag question that also says 2. So I guess he played 2. But he was in the game. He played. So I don't know. I thought that was a really weird and bizarre decision. Not that Juergens would have been great against Jalen Carter, but like, you would hope for more than just a speed bump, I suppose, is kind of the approach there. So you're close to the offensive line that you might have wanted, but I don't think you're going to get that. And I think having one weakness is not the end of the world offensive line wise. We're seeing some pretty good teams that have 1 or 2 weaknesses. It just the weakness just cannot be so bad that it defines and takes over a game. And so, can you get there? Maybe Michael Juergens or Joe Huber will take you there, but Blake Brandel won't. And that's the issue. But yeah, I mean, from the run game perspective, I mean, the first half was pretty poor. The blocking was pretty poor. The second half, the blocking got a little bit better, especially running behind Brian O'Neill. But I think Jordan Mason just really had an outstanding game in the second half. I think that was more of it. A lot of yards after contact, a lot of really excellent, patience and he was demonstrating good vision, but I kind of want to like hone in on his anticipatory vision, his understanding of where players are going to want to end up and leveraging against that. So some ways that you do that, you might press the lane, which is where you intend to go into one gap, but fake as you're going in another to force the linebacker into that second gap. That's like one way to do it, but there are a lot of ways to kind of anticipate the way that players will end up stringing out their plays, and leveraging against that to create additional space for yourself is really smart. And so I thought Mason had a really good game, especially in the second half. But yeah, I mean, the running game wasn't completely there, especially early on, but it ended up being, a pretty fun watch by the end. If only there were kind of good quarterback play to go with it.
If only. It turns out we're asking for way too much there. Well, the defensive side of the ball, other than letting that first drive go through, they were really clamping down outside of letting the receivers just catch everything that was going their way. Yeah,
which you would think would be a pretty significant drawback when you're talking about how good a defense was. But I think that you're right, like kind of despite the way that sounds. Despite the receivers giving up everything, I thought the defense was good. No, or I shouldn't say the receivers, the defensive backs. And here's the thing so I looked at all 6 kind of 20 plus yard throws, right? He completed 5 of them. Jalen Hurts completed 5 of them for like a ridiculous, 2 EPA per play on those throws. It was a pretty outstanding. So I looked at them, and 4 of them occurred after the 3 second mark, actually. 3 of them occurred after the 3 second mark. 1 more occurred after the 2.5 second mark. To me, that's not an actual issue of the defensive backs. Like, obviously, Isaiah Rodgers had a really poor game in a lot of respects. There's been some news about the backlash that he's received. He said that he received a bunch of racist messages, told the media about it, and the Vikings rightly published a piece standing up for him, like a statement saying that they abhor, even the notion that he would receive racist messages, and it sounds like threats too. Obviously, that sucks, but putting that kind of into its own little compartment and talking about performance on the field, you'd want more from Rodgers, obviously. But I just want to emphasize that even on the Josh Metellus one, Josh Metellus giving up that early big play to AJ Brown. That play didn't go off until 4.63 seconds after the snap. Like, that was a long time to hold up. In almost every one of those, the 2 deep balls that were before the 2.5 second mark, one was incomplete, the only incomplete deep ball, and the other one was at the very end of the game, that 3rd and 9, 45-yarder. Which, I mean, obviously that sucks, but that tells me that you've got that mistake, and these defenses aren't going to be perfect on explosives, but the issue is primarily the pass rush there in that case. Grenard didn't play as well as he needed to, and Grenard's been having an outstanding season. Dallas Turner didn't play as well as he needed to, and he's been having a pretty decent season. Javon Hargrave hasn't been playing that well. He hasn't been having an outstanding season, so you don't have to worry about that. Jalen Redmond and Jonathan Allen played all right. Jonathan Allen especially. But it's not enough. You need the edge rushers to do more. And if they're not doing more, you need every defensive tackle to be playing at a really high level. And that wasn't happening. It was only Jonathan Allen. And even so, Allen was generating pressure, but those pressures weren't always turning into sacks. And so the Eagles had something like a 48, maybe 50% pressure rate in this. It was a really high pressure rate, but mostly it's because Hurts held onto the ball, was waiting for guys to get open that weren't open, which is a credit to the secondary. And then scrambled for a bit. The Vikings pass rush couldn't finish. They couldn't bring them down. Once they made contact with them, they very rarely turned that into a sack. So he moved around and created, these big plays out of nowhere. I think at one point there was just kind of like, all right, we called the coverage with a big hole in it. You found it. credit to you. So not a huge deal. That's the risk that you play with. But a lot of it was just you're scrambling around for a little while, and then suddenly Isaiah Rodgers loses leverage on the best receiver in the NFC East, right? Like, okay, fine, great, good work. I Rodgers should have played better, but for the most part, I think that's a pass rush issue. And I will say, from a run defense standpoint, the Vikings were really outstanding. And I thought, oh no, after the first 3 plays where Saquon Barkley rips off, what was it, like an 8-yard run, and then a 3-yard run on 2nd and 2 or something like that, and then like a 5-yard run on the subsequent 1st and 10, like the 3 successful plays in a row. And I was like, oh my God, I was making this huge stink about the return of Blake Cashman to the lineup, the fact that Harrison Smith at some point is going to have full-time snap counts, which in this game he did. He played every snap on defense. And that's going to be enough to maybe fix a lot of the problems in the run game. Like, I was pretty confident in that. And I see those first 3 runs and I'm like, well, there goes that take. Dang. And then they held up for the rest of the game. They played outstandingly in run defense. What was it, like 46 rushing yards or something like that? The worst success rate I think that the Eagles have had with Saquon Barkley, period maybe, and if not period, in a long time. They've been struggling running the ball this year, relatively speaking, but this was a pretty catastrophic game for them from a running perspective. And Jalen Redmond was huge about that. Dallas Turner played a role. Jonathan Grenard was pretty good about that. Having Eric Wilson and not Ivan Pace back there, that probably helped a lot. But it did detract from your pass rush, which, as we just identified, was a huge problem in this game. But yeah, I thought the Vikings improved in an area where obviously you always want to be good at everything, but like an area where you typically maybe care about it less, but not so much that you neglect it by the amount that the Vikings seem to have, right? And so I thought that was a really outstanding run defense performance.
It was impressive, and Barkley admittedly has struggled over the course of this year, but it did feel good to be able to, for the most part, neutralize him.
Yeah, but because that if you don't do it right, that he has the ability to just go off, right? Like that the moment you are like, well, he's not playing that well, so we can kind of let off the gas a little bit, that he's just going to have just this outstanding, incredible, game where you're gonna have to figure out, like, you're gonna have to answer questions afterwards, like, yeah, why'd he go off for like 180 yards? And you have to be like, well, we thought he wasn't that good anymore. You don't want that. Like, you don't want that smoke at all. So yeah, Barkley isn't playing that well this year, and I'm glad that didn't inform their thinking.
Well, I don't know that I want to spend any more time talking about Carson Wentz as a quarterback. The Vikings
you might have to, because it's a short week.
It's a short week. Vikings will be playing the Chargers on Thursday. We'll have a preview episode for you probably Thursday morning. But is there a time frame for when we can find out a bit more about JJ McCarthy, like as in the possibility of him starting, or are we at a situation now where you think we're just going to end up riding it out with Wentz for a couple of more weeks until it's time?
No, I think it's just the one more week. And even then, it might not be the 1 week, because McCarthy did practice during the bye. He did practice this week. It is a pain tolerance thing, which can kind of flip pretty quickly. So it is possible that he plays this week. We had 2, and they've had a really poor track record this year. So I don't want to make it sound like this is definitive, but We've had 2 reports from national media. I think it was Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero, that Carson Wentz is probably going to start this week. So that's the direction I'm headed in when I'm thinking about kind of what's going to happen here. But I would think that after Thursday, that it's very, very likely that McCarthy is just going to start. So
the Lions?
Yeah, well, it's going to be one of these teams that it's going to be evil to try and figure out. So might as well be the Lions.
I mean, if you wait one more week, you've got the Ravens, and that defense is atrocious.
It is. It is. It is not. They're not having a good time at all. So I guess, but like you got to play big games at some point. And this won't be his first start, right? No. He got his against the Chicago Bears defense, and he doesn't deserve the consideration. Just play the game that you're ready for now. It's I don't know. It's not going to be fun, but it's not going to be any better to have like Carson Wentz play in those games and still kind of focus on finding ways to maximize what you can do this year. So, yeah, I think probably next week, but we'll see. It sounds like it's a pain tolerance thing.
Well, let's go to the mailbag. We've got some Viking stuff at the beginning of it. MVP candidate Max Brosmer asks, for Arif's petty revenge corner, if this podcast has taught me anything, it's that people from North Dakota are extremely petty, vengeful people. Example, Arif. This makes me wonder.
Whoa, what?
Yeah, this makes me wonder. It's not like they're calling you a citizen of Bloomington. This makes me wonder, is Carson Wentz a pawn in a long-running scheme to make Minnesota football fans miserable, concocted by North Dakotans who have developed an inferiority complex in relation to their superior neighbor to the east?
There's so much going on here.
You're a famous former resident of North Dakota.
I'm not particularly defensive of the state of North Dakota, if you haven't noticed over the years, James. Like, it feels like these statements are designed to prod me into defending North Dakota versus Minnesota, one of the best states, period. Certainly, I personally, I think it's a top 3 state. But like, what do you want me to say? Yeah, obviously Minnesota is a better state. They have health care. What do you want? Do I think it's an inferiority complex? Not for me. I much prefer to live in Minnesota. I don't think that my identity as a North Dakotan, past tense, really defines my approach to identifying now as a Minnesotan. Is Carson Wentz a pawn in a long-running scheme to make Minnesota football fans miserable? I wouldn't say he's a pawn. I would say he is kind of an architect here. I would say that he is responsible for a lot of it, and I think that he should be held accountable to it.
I really thought you were just going to go in further on the possible chess metaphor. He's not a pawn. He's much more of a rook or a bishop.
I was thinking about that, but I didn't know how to like close it out after I had picked a piece, right? And I was like, no, that's going to be way too, like, I know that we love reaching and, extending metaphors well beyond their useful lifespan here in this podcast. It's a long running respected tradition. But here I was just like, how would I finish a rook bit here? I don't know.
Let's go to Raul, who asks, for Arif's football corner, what was the more suspect late game decision? Not kicking on 4th and 2 or cover 0 on 3rd and long?
Well, presumably on cover 0, you're not covering 0, right? That's kind of the goal there, is that you are actually in coverage. No, I don't have an issue with the Vikings were blitzing on 70% of their plays in that game. And I just want to stress, it wasn't not working. And by that, I mean, obviously there were like 4 other big plays before that. So in a sense, he has a perfect pass rating before he does that. He's, leading the league in EPA per play already before that in the week. So obviously from a production standpoint, it's not working. But when you're taking a look at what the problem is on defense, it's not because your cornerbacks aren't holding up when you're blitzing. They are holding up outstandingly well when you're blitzing. The issue is that you're not getting home on your pressures. Is the answer to that to only rush 4? I don't think so. So I think that's a much more defensible decision. I'm not saying you can't make a really good argument for a different decision, but like the Vikings defense was, as we were pointing out, playing well. Especially, they had a really good success rate in this game, by the way. They had an 85th or 88th percentile success rate in this game. One of the better success rates we've seen. And that's with a 72% blitz rate. It's working. So, you can argue and say maybe don't do that there, but yeah, I don't know, like dance with the lady that brought you there, right? Like that's how you got to a situation where you can get the ball back with comeback scenario. Just do what you've been good at. And they did, and it didn't work. As for not kicking on 4th and 2, yeah, I understand wanting to kick there. I actually don't think that was a bad decision because, and Kevin O'Connell explained it, I thought, fairly well after the game. He was like, look, we've got a kicker who can boot it 60 yards, right? We don't know that we'll have a lot of opportunities to get that close to the end zone. So on our subsequent drive, it'll only take a couple of plays to get into field goal range, but it might take 12 plays to get into the end zone. We don't know that we can do that. So we have to take advantage of the opportunity that we have because you have to score twice, right? We have to take advantage of the opportunity that we have to actually score here. I think it was fine to go for it on 4th and 2. The problem is you can't take a sack. Carson, this is one of the few pressures that was not Blake Randall's fault and that Carson was moving around in the pocket for. And as soon as you have time to react, and it's after, I think, the 2.5 second mark, this is one of Brian O'Neill's 2 pressures, I think, in this game. As soon as you have the ability to kind of respond, your clock has to be pristine. You have to understand you got to throw that ball away or throw the ball to a receiver or something, but you can't let that happen. So that's on Carson Wentz, right? And that sack was everything. It turns it from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 18, and it drains 26, I think, seconds off the clock. That was huge. And then you follow that up with the throw over the middle to TJ Hawkinson, which also drains a lot more clock. And now you're in a spot where, what was it, 2:04 or 2:07 left? And you throw the ball, and when you throw the ball, it leaves 2 minutes left, and so you don't get advantage of the 2-minute warning. So that, I think, that clock management failure was primarily a Carson Wentz problem, not, I think, a Kevin O'Connell problem, because you can only manage the clock to the extent that your offense will execute it, and you can't manage the clock scared. You can't manage the clock assuming everyone's going to fail, because if you're assuming everyone's going to fail, then what are you doing this for anyway? You have to score twice. If everyone's going to fail, it doesn't matter, right? You're not going to score twice in either scenario. So I get where he's going. My proposal here, and I understand that this is like really out there, so I understand like maybe this is a stupid proposal, and I wrote it out in my post-game recap. So if you think that this is stupid, fine. I'm not going to really be that upset with that, but I think it's at least worth consideration that they should have rushed the field goal unit onto the field immediately after that sack, because it's 2nd and 18. The clock is going to get dripped down to 2:23. If you set up for a normal play, you got to call the play. You might be able to get that field goal off quicker than to run that subsequent play. And now you get the 2-minute warning on your side as they attempt to drain the clock. And so, obviously you don't want to give up the 45-yard play on 3rd and 9. But if you have the extra timeout, then that isn't a killer. That doesn't kill you. Now, you're probably going to lose, but it doesn't kill you, because remember, they had to extend these handoffs and have these long kneel plays, because they ended up in 4th down with like 2 seconds left. You have an extra timeout on top of that, you don't have to worry about that as much. And so you get the additional plays, and you force them to have to run a play, and that gives you an opportunity to get back in the game. So that's the thing, is that you need to preserve the 2-minute. And Wentz taking a little bit too long on the subsequent plays, right? Taking the sack, taking a little bit too long getting set up on the next play, taking too long with like 2:08 left, or 2:07 or whatever. You want to have 2:04 left when you throw that ball. Taking too long to throw the ball away, essentially. That's what killed the Vikings more than a decision not to kick on 4th and 2. I thought it was smart to go for it on 4th and 2. And I think most analysts would have agreed with Kevin O'Connell there that you've got a field goal kicker with long field goal range. And so your subsequent drive, you don't have to worry about getting as far as you've gotten. You don't need to sink the time, or is it punt, essentially, the time that you put to get into the red zone away, knowing that you'd have to do it again. And so the luxury of only having to go 30 yards with 30 seconds left is one that you would want, as opposed to having to go 60 yards with 40 seconds left or 60 seconds left. That's just much harder. So I think that is a game decision worth more consideration than the cover zero, but I'm not that upset about it. I think instead there's a lot of game management stuff that Carson Wentz screwed up there, and maybe an opportunity for a really unique approach where maybe you rush out the field goal unit right after the sack.
Let's go to our next question from Michael, who asks, was the Brandel decision a, quote, hot hand decision, or was Juergens just not healthy enough to play? He wasn't inactive and ended up taking 2 snaps anyway over Brandel.
I think it was a hot hand decision, which I think is a really unwise way to handle that. I know the Browns' defensive line is outstanding, right? And being able to hold up against them does speak to something, right? That is pretty meaningful. But it's not as meaningful as never having played that position in your life. And I said it on the podcast, I was on the Viking Squad show before the game, right? I think it was on the Thursday before the game, Monday or Thursday before the game. I was like, he played well, but I would move away from that as quickly as possible, because I think the fact that he's never played center is going to show up again. And it did multiple times, both in terms of that 22-yard, drive killing miss snap, right? It just like popped right over a 6'5" quarterback's head. And another mistake that it wasn't on Carson Wentz that time. Good for you, dude. And just his poor leverage and capability against that defensive line. And it wasn't just Jalen Carter. It was also Moro Ojomo. Like, he had a really bad game. And he had some bad reps against Jordan Davis, right? And it's like, well, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, that's just an outstanding defensive tackle pair. And it's like, that's true, right? But bad centers play better. Garrett Bradbury plays better against that group than Blake Brandel did. And he's not playing well against that group. He's getting demolished, right? But not quite to the extent that Blake Brandel did. He had, the way I was talking about how we have to be really cognizant of how bad McCarthy truly was and how difficult it is to explain the chasm between the worst quarterback by production this year, McCarthy, and the second worst, and then the 8th worst, right? That is a very similar level of chasm to how Blake Brandel played. And I think his PFF grade is like low, but not like, remember when Garrett Bradbury got like a 0.0 pass blocking grade against the Falcons? Not total pass blocking grade, big, but he only had like 11 pass blocking snaps. So you were like, okay, I don't, it should be like that. That was one of the worst games at center I've personally ever seen. Let me actually take a look at what his PFF grade was. I said it was unjustly high, and I didn't actually look at it. 51.1, way too high. What are you doing? That's crazy. 51.1, God. No, that should be like in the 30s at least. Truly awful game from him. And yeah, I think it was a hot hand decision, because it's like you have multiple guys who have played center before. Consider that.
Let's go to Tracy, who asks, seeing as the Carson Wentz experiment has failed, which quarterback should become the Kevin O'Connell rehabilitation project this year? I think Tua might be available soon.
After the Ryan Kelly concussion debacle, do we want like another guy where the next time he gets a concussion, you're like, hey, for your family, you should consider retiring? Like, I just never want to utter the phrase, hey, your family loves you, when I'm talking about a player's decision to play. That just seems like a bad scenario to be in. Let's take a look at kind of the quarterbacks that we have available to us that are playing poorly right now. Let's go to stat head, sort by adjusted net yards per attempt. Okay, you've got Sam Darnold at the top, of course. You've got Daniel Jones third, of course. Let's scroll down. Cam Ward, obviously can't get him. Jake Browning, maybe, but I just feel like a lot of these guys are first-round picks. Geno Smith, too old. Don't want Joe Flacco. Are you going to be able to pry Joe Flacco from the Bengals? Tua, I just talked about. Dylan Gabriel, too young. They're not letting go of him. Kyler Murray would be interesting, but like I think the thing about Kevin O'Connell is that he likes quarterbacks that stand tall in the pocket and just take a hit. Like that's Kirk Cousins did that. Joshua Dobbs did that. Nick Mullins did the heck out of that. Carson Wentz, we know, is doing that. JJ McCarthy is doing that. Like that's like the one trait that he wants. Trevor Lawrence, they're going to hold on to him for a little bit longer, so you can't get in. He just signed a big contract. Bryce Young, same thing as Kyler Murray. Don't want that. Justin Fields, no. We're in a tough spot. I don't think we can get anybody who is starting this year. Mac Jones would be a good one, but he's playing too well, obviously. Don't want Russell Wilson for obvious reasons. You got to throw over the middle of the field, right? Like that's one of the things. So we need somebody who isn't playing right now. Marcus Mariota might be a good one. Because obviously he hasn't been playing well. He's Washington now, and he had to play the 1 or 2 games. Kirk Cousins, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he might be available next year.
That could be a fun reclamation project.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that there's a couple of opportunities here. Actually, no, I don't want to close this question out right now. Let's take a look at free agency, the free agency track for 2026. Take a look at quarterbacks. Oh yeah, Daniel Jones is an unrestricted free agent for 2026. Call him up, I guess. You got Marcus Mariota, so that's probably my one. Zach Wilson, that would be very funny. That's 2. And I'm not feeling Kenny Pickett. I think you need a stronger arm than that to be a Kevin O'Connell guy. Although I guess Nick Mullins, right? Jimmy Garoppolo, that guy. I mean, I don't know that he can take a hit, but I know that he does, right? That's got to count for something. God, he's 35. Jesus. Trubisky would be funny. Yeah, I could see that a little bit, maybe. And I think that's it. I think those are kind of your options.
Let's go to Alex, who asks, the referees just overturned a challenge that they decided was wrong and gave Dan Campbell the challenge back. What the hell? After Hawkinson's touchdown being taken away and this circus of a 5-minute delay to determine whether or not it was a first down, when will the NFL either let replays make calls or not? I'm fine with replay assist as long as it's consistent. It obviously is not after watching 2 extremely similar catches be called differently in the Vikings game. Though I suppose it was consistent as both went against the Vikings. I guess my question is, can we get some consistency from the NFL in this regard?
I mean, you've effectively made the argument that they have. So for people who didn't watch the earlier Monday Night Football game, Tampa Bay against Detroit, Cade Otton caught a pass, turned upfield. It was 4th down, reached out and hit the ground and then fumbled, which I thought the ground couldn't cause a fumble, but okay. Then quote unquote fumbled. The ball goes out, someone else recovers it. And so there are a couple of challenges here. 1, was it a fumble? If it's a fumble, did the Lions recover it? 2, did he actually catch the ball? Because he turns upfield. If he catches the ball, then it could be a fumble, right? But if he doesn't, then it's incomplete. 4th down, don't got to worry about it. If he does catch the ball, did he actually get the ball across the plane of the first down marker by the time his knee comes down, right? So there's like a couple of elements to this play. So Dan Campbell challenges whether or not it's a catch. Now, the refs do rule it's a catch, right? So the challenge is wrong. But they also ruled upon that review that the spot was incorrect and he didn't actually get the line to gain. So 4th down, turnover on downs, the Lions get the ball. And then Dan Campbell gets the challenge back. I actually don't know if this is the case. I'm just kind of trusting the question asker here because I had it on mute. But okay, if he gets the challenge back, I agree that doesn't make sense. We've seen other scenarios before where a coach challenges a play that has multiple questionable elements to it, and they get the challenge wrong, but in the course of reviewing the play, something else that is reviewable gets reviewed, and it changes the outcome of the play in a way that is favorable to the coach who made the challenge. And that coach still loses the challenge. In fact, I believe I recall this happening to the Vikings once or twice. And, fine. I think that's fine. I think that if you challenge a play, you need to be specific about what you are challenging. And in that specificity, the judgment will be made about whether or not you deserve, whether or not you won the challenge, and whether or not you get the ability to win your challenge back if you were correct, right? I also think that in reviewing a play, if you notice something that is reviewable, like let's say the spot, and you notice that is incorrect, you should also correct things so that they're closer to the truth, because you're not spending any more time than you typically would, and it's better to just kind of get it right. So that's all the case. So here he should have lost his challenge, and it sounds like based off of this question, he didn't, right? On top of that, the way that Hawkinson caught the ball versus the way that Cade Otton caught the ball why is one a catch and one not? I actually don't think that this is inconsistent, if I'll be honest. I don't think that they're similar enough for us to call this inconsistent, because I thought that he had secured the ball and made a football move, moving upfield to do it, and then lost control of the ball again, but not until he had gone down. And with Hawkinson, he had not secured the ball by the time both of his hands were off the ball. That I think is the key there. He had not secured it, and as he's tumbling forward, he's not making a football move. As he's tumbling forward, his hands come off the ball, and the ball moves as a result of hitting the ground. I think those are different things. And I think the reason that the football gets dislodged in Cade Otton's case is because he moved the ball with his control, and in doing so, made a move that dislodged the ball. Hawkinson didn't do that. He was not in control enough of it to move the ball in a way where that would happen. So I don't think that that's inconsistent. But I do think you got to be correct about the challenges thing. So Alex, I'm sorry. I think the premise of the second part of your question is incorrect. And I think that the NFL is being inconsistent, but not in the way that you primarily identified, just kind of in the other way that you identified.
Let's go to Jesse from Brooklyn, who asks, so as you guys know, we have
whoa. You're reading right over a correction?
Well, I didn't think you wanted to be proven wrong, so I decided
No, it says I was right. The correction says I was right.
In a manner of speaking, sure. Also, a correction for the linear Super Bowl. Amazingly, Arif was right. The words he just wanted to hear. Arif was right, and the linear Super Bowls have a half-life that reduces them by half after each season.
Let's go.
Any team can win the Vikings linear Super Bowl by beating the team that currently holds the trophy. Mm-hmm. If two teams tie, the Super Bowl is evenly split between those two teams. Mm-hmm. If the Packers would ever possess a Vikings linear Super Bowl trophy, it then ceases to exist. Finally, a new Vikings linear Super Bowl trophies are spawned whenever the Vikings defeat the Packers. Mm-hmm. As of Week 11, 2021, when the Packers fans said the Vikings won their Super Bowl by beating the Packers, and we ran with it. Yeah,
great. I'm right. Okay, what does Jesse from Brooklyn say?
So, just sometimes you just need to be known that you're right. All right. So, as you guys know, we have a solid Vikings contingency up here in New York City that I've been a part of for about 13 years now. However, we have one member of our core group that is the ultimate doomsayer, constantly bad-mouthing quarterback play coaching, and especially Kwesi. What is your Minnesota nice way of dealing with such a person, and how do we explain to him that Kwesi is not the devil incarnate, and we're actually doing pretty well, all things considered? I mean, as long as the man doesn't have to draft, he seems to be okay.
Yeah, I think the question about, how good is your general manager at a very top level, obviously you can go to all of these details, right? How does he do in this element? How does he do in this element? How does he do in this element? Is he good in free agency? Is he good in the draft? Is he good in the trade market? Is he good at, signing extensions? Is he good at convincing players to stay? Is he good at cap management, right? All of these things, right? And in some ways, obviously, Kwesi falls significantly behind. And in some ways, he's ahead, right? The question you should probably ask yourself in evaluating a GM at a very top level, especially if you want to push back against somebody who's arguing that a GM is bad and you want to make the argument that he's not as bad as you think, or even that he's good, is you should just ask the question, hey, do you think the roster's been good? Do you think that the roster is good this year? Do you think it was good last year? Do you think it was good the year before? Do you think it's generally been a good roster, a top half or even better roster when Kwesi has been in charge? And the answer has always been yes, right? You can't get around that. It's not just been an above average roster. It's been one of the better rosters in the league every single year, right? At that very top level, you have to argue, I don't think he's the best GM in the league, obviously. I don't think he's even a top 5 GM, right? But you have to at least argue that there's no way he's a bad GM just because one of the things he's bad at, he happens to be maybe the worst in the NFL at, right? Which, I don't know, maybe he's not, right? He also drafted Jordan Addison. That's working out pretty well. And, time will tell on Dallas Turner, JJ McCarthy, and Donovan Jackson. But, he's bad at one thing, catastrophically bad at one thing, and the roster is pretty good. So at the very end of the day, you got to be like, hey, he's probably an above average guy here. There's some precarity here. You got to worry about how old the team is. There's some injury proneness here that's causing a problem here. But it's a good roster. I think very few people would disagree with that. That's how I would start with that. From a Minnesota nice passive aggressive way, you just keep calling his takes interesting. Oh, that's so interesting. Wow, I never really thought about it that way. You have such an interesting way of looking at this. That's so curious. It's so valuable to have such an interesting, different perspective here when we're talking about the Vikings, because I just don't think of things like that. Just like really, and I just don't know if this will work for you in New York, because it like what I just said probably triggered a couple of Minnesotans listening, right? I can't imagine that coming across as particularly mean-spirited in New York City. I gotta be honest. But yeah, you just keep on, like, what a unique way to look at those things. That's really fascinating that you've come up with it like that. I guess I wouldn't have thought about it like that. That's how probably I would approach the way that he brings up those things if I wanted to be really Minnesotan about it. And I promise you that's infuriating to Minnesotans, what I just said. But I don't know, to a New Yorker, it feels like maybe that just sounds like a compliment.
I mean, if you're going to go full Minnesota on it, I feel like the way that you get back at him is to make sure that you steal his Tupperware container from the potluck, the one that's already got his like name sticker on it, that's got his address and everything.
It's been yellowed with like chili and yeah.
It's like when you just take his container of Snicker salad, and then that's it. That's how you handle that. Dr. TWD is asking a question that kind of refers to something that you were speaking about in your piece last week. Do we have any sense of how much teams are using AI to game plan for a given game? I assume front offices already employ some AI models for analytics purposes.
So nearly every front office has tasked someone in their organization with exploring or even developing this possibility, as far as I can tell, as far as I know. That does not mean they are using it. So that's a really important distinction here. A lot of analytics departments around the NFL are project-based. And so they assign themselves, or more often, the front office or the coaching staff, or both, if we're being honest, will ask them questions, and they will find ways to see if they can come up with answers or develop tools that can kind of help them. A big part of what the Vikings analytics front office did at the beginning of the Spielman era, when he got like really into that kind of stuff, was actually not to develop. I mean, he did hire a data scientist exclusively to develop models, but internally, a lot of what the analytics staff was doing was making sure all the systems were connected to each other and talking to each other, that the evaluations in the pro scouting department could be easily pulled up by people working the draft, right? So in the war room, right, you're in the draft and someone proposes a trade, right? They're like, hey, we'll trade you our edge rusher and a third round pick for your first round pick or something like that. And if you don't have access to what edge rushers are currently available in the free agency market in April, right, which, it's not going to be amazing or anything like that, or you don't have access to your internal evaluations of your own edge rushers to see if you really need one and how much that's going to, hurt. Like, if you don't have access to all of the information you need immediately, it's going to cause some problems, and you kind of have to make some estimates, and that's just not as ideal. And so they would connect all of these systems together, and all of the draft information would be in a bunch of different kind of databases, right? If you've ever worked in healthcare, it's like that, but also healthcare is still like that, I guess. And the good thing is that it's not nearly as big or as nearly a big a mess, or you don't have to deal with as nearly many regulations covering kind of how you can interact with this data. And so you can kind of unify all these systems and make sure that they all work together. That took a while. It took like 2 years, right? And then he showed off his amazing, awesome draft system to the media. It was really cool. It had touch screens, which was not an important part of the job that they did, but they did do that, and that is fun. And so they did that. And so a lot of them are project oriented. They have projects to do, and they won't necessarily just be like, hey, we figured out that running the ball sucks actually, and you shouldn't do it. Which, by the way, almost every NFL analytics department is much more interested in running the ball than every public facing analytics guru that you talk to. They like running the ball a lot more than like Ben Baldwin or Josh Frisco does, right? Or Kevin Cole or Timo Risk. It's something to just kind of keep in mind, right? But they don't do that, or they don't say like linebackers don't matter as much. I mean, they might, but usually they're asked a question, right? How much should we invest in linebackers? And here they were probably, a lot of them, almost all of them were asked, hey, we're hearing a lot about AI. Can we use this to improve our operations? And maybe they asked more specific questions, or maybe there's a dialogue, back and forth, like, hey, what do you envision this doing for you? How do you think it would improve your operations? What part of your operations do you think need improving? Hey, let me explain. And sometimes it'll be an open conversation. They'll ask, hey, I'm hearing a lot about AI. What can it do? And they'll have a conversation, be like, hey, you can chat with it, you can talk to it, and it will give you essentially a reasonable facsimile of a conversation. And in that conversation, it'll sound naturally like a human. And maybe you can kind of connect that to some other tools to turn that into something, right? And this is what Sumer Brain was attempting to do, right? Is that they were trying to turn natural language conversation into the ability to look up statistics. And the thing is, it should actually be well positioned for this kind of thing, because we also know that AI has been unusually good. And I'm not going to say it's actually great at, but I think unusually good relative to what you might expect, or relative to kind of the other things that it attempts to do at coding. And that's very, very similar to the tools that you need to look up stuff in a database using coding tools. I know a lot of software engineers think that it's very bad at coding. I don't want to argue with you about that. There's software engineers in my life who think it's bad at coding. And the thing is, you're right. It's not good for your use case. I'm sure you've tested it. That's not my argument. My argument is just it can generate snippets of code. And it can generate snippets of code faster and better than people who can't code by significant factors, right? And there are coders who use it. There are vibe coders, and it turns out they kind of suck at it. But there are professional coders that use the coding approach that you get from AI to improve their coding workflow, and some of them have successfully integrated it. So in that sense, it's obviously good at that. So in theory, you can turn natural language lookup into a way to look into a database or into your information and give you responses, right? So in theory, you've got all of your scouting reports digitized, let's say, all like 4,000 scouting reports your scouts have produced, this year. And it's narrowed down to the 1,200 or so that you think are truly eligible to make an NFL team and will be available to you. And you look through your roster, you've signed a couple of guys in free agency, you look through your roster and you say, hey, we're really good at receiver, we're really good at running back, we're really good at tight end, but honestly, we just need somebody who runs fast. We need a Jameson Williams, and failing that, we need a Khalif Raymond, right? We need an Andre Roberts, right? It doesn't have to be good at everything, right? It doesn't have to be Deshaun Jackson. It doesn't have to be Tyreek Hill, right? It just has to be somebody who alters the geometry of the defense. So I'm going to ask it to come up with a list of names in our scouting report or in our scouting database of players that kind of meet these parameters, that don't just run fast, but have a good deep ball game, are good at deep ball tracking, get open deep downfield, right? And I'm going to ask it to do that. And in theory, it should be able to do that because it does a semantic analysis of all of the scouting reports and produces the names of the players who match that criteria. And a really, really fine-tuned, well-positioned AI that has a lot of resources devoted to it to do reasoning functions and essentially fact checks itself, should be able to do that. Most won't, and I think a lot won't. But in theory, you could do that. And so you could see that as a possible use case, right? But the problem is you have to be really fine-tune it and tweak it to actually be pretty good at that. And you have to make sure that it has guardrails on it, that it can only access certain tools, and that if it can't access a tool, that it tells you that it can't access the tool, instead of giving you a fake answer because it knows it has to give you an answer. You have to really be very deliberate about the way that you tweak it, right? So yeah, it is possible, but I think game planning, it probably isn't going to do that. What it might do, and if you follow Brett Coleman and EJ Snyder, maybe you saw in my piece or on their podcast at Bootleg Football that they got a lot of pushback on their use of Sumer Brain in the way that they prepare for shows, right? And then they responded to that right after the coach of the Titans, I already forgot his name, Brian Callahan, got fired. In their follow-up podcast to that, they devoted some time to talking about it. And what they said was that they used it to kind of look up these statistics. And then because the statistics they had suggested, like, hey, maybe, Aaron Rodgers has a weakness against cover one. Okay, that's what Sumer Brain has told us. Now let's look at the film where we've got access to every single cover one snap that Aaron Rodgers has played against. and then we'll talk about it. And so it allows you to winnow down and then verify manually what you're looking at. And maybe you'll use it for that. Maybe you'll ask, Panthers brain, right? Because Eric Eater works for the Panthers and he used to work for Sumer. Let's pretend, they asked him to write an AI. Panthers brain. We're going up against the Saints next week. What are the defensive coverages that they run or that they've run into that have caused them the most problems? And maybe they'll come up with the answers that are broadly maybe directionally correct and come up with all of the numbers and stuff like that. And then you go through your database because you're subscribed to PFF Ultimate and to Sumer Sports or whatever. And you look up every play that they've tagged as like cover 3 or something. And then you look at it and see, well, why are they failing at cover 3? Why are they so bad at it? And you produce a defense in response to those questions. So you might use it from there, but you're not typically asking, what should we do, and then doing it. That's probably not the way that these front offices or coaching staffs would use AI if they're using AI, if the teams have told them that AI is an appropriate tool for them to use, which my understanding is a lot of these teams have developed AIs and not all of them have decided that they're deployment worthy necessarily yet. So that's probably kind of the way that you would end up deploying something like that, or the way that it would be deployed. But I do know that most teams are doing something along those lines. Oh, by the way, I do want to tell a story about this. There's I think they're called Wildcard or something like that. There's a Counter-Strike team that was really promising. I just watched a video on this. That was really promising and had been climbing up the ranks and had a pretty decent roster. And I don't know much about esports or specifically, especially Counter-Strike, but my understanding is they were doing pretty well. And then they started making a series of really bizarre decisions. They like benched their 2 best players, including their team captain. They started rotating people in and out. They started signing players that just weren't as high quality as the players that they'd already had in their roster. And after a while, one of those players was either cut from the team or left the team or something like that. And they asked him, like, hey, how did you manage these really tumultuous months where you weren't playing and the team wasn't doing well? And how did you kind of manage that? And he was like, yeah, management asked ChatGPT who should play. I mean, he said, I think he wasn't definitive about it, but he was like, I've heard that they were asking ChatGPT what they should do. And that's why they benched the team captain and then brought him back, and they benched me. And then they added a bunch of players because they were asking who should we add and what should we do? And absolutely, I would hope no NFL team does that. That's insane to me. Even in a world where I'm really optimistic about AI, and I didn't talk about any of the environmental effects of having a really well-developed reasoning and fact-checking function, which you need a lot of GPUs to get that right. Well, especially to train it anyway. Even in that world where I'm rosy-eyed and I'm really happy about these LLMs, which I'm not, I'm very suspicious of them. Even in that world, don't do that. That's insane. And I don't think any NFL team is doing that.
Let's go to our next question, which is from Damien, who is asking, who is having the more fraudulent season, us or the Packers?
How could the Vikings be? I mean, they're 3-3, right? I don't know how the Vikings could be having a fraudulent season. I mean, the Vikings are losing close games. What, they're 1-2 in close games or something like that. The Vikings defense is like top 10, not top 5. They've experienced turnover regression, right? So they're not generating turnovers at the level that they did last year. That's pretty significant, right? I would say the Packers, because they keep on relying on these giant explosives to get things done. And then when they don't have access to the explosives, they wither. I mean, the Packers, what are they? They're not like 4-2, are they? I should take a look at the standings before I figure out if the Packers, they're 4-1-1, right? Because they tied. We made fun of them last week for that.
Sure did.
Yeah. So I would say the Packers, because they're winning games, and they're an average team. The defense is good. The defense has not been playing up to its level. I think it'll regress positively. But I've talked about that offense forever. It's a really, really volatile offense that sometimes will look really good and sometimes will look just atrocious. And that's what you get out of them. They scored, obviously we saw them score like 10 points against the Browns and then 40 points against the Cowboys. But like, they've only been scoring 27 points in every other game. And I feel like That's weird. That's not going to hold up. That Cardinals game was a mess. I hated watching that. But like they only scored 27 points against the Bengals. We all watched that game. I mean, we all watched the Vikings play the Bengals. You should do better than that. I know how good those Bengals are. Come on.
Next question is from Kenneth Allen, who was asking, is Kevin O'Connell too committed to competing this season? It feels like the push to start Wentz is driven by him simply being better, but shouldn't we want as many snaps as possible for JJ to see whether or not he's actually a bust? He can't actually think this team is competitive, right?
I mean, of course he does. Can you imagine you court a 32-year-old, 33-year-old player at the end of their career, and you say, "Hey, we want you to sign for you could either retire, or you could sign for a team that's going to try to win something, or you could sign with us for the same amount of money, but we're not going to try to win. We need to develop this guy. We need to develop this like rookie quarterback." Or can you imagine that they did say that they did say, "We're going to try to win. You know, we think we've got, the best team in the league. We think we've got a chance to win the Super Bowl. We think that you're going to be a big part of that. And we want you to make sure that you don't retire. We want you to play 1 or 2 more years with us so that you can get that ring that you've been looking for." And then partway through the season, you're like, this is a development season. The Vikings have the oldest defense second oldest defense in the league. I think Washington's older, right? They have the second oldest defense in the league. They wanted to make sure that Ryan Kelly wouldn't retire. They were one of the only teams that approached Will Fries, right? They asked Jonathan Allen not to retire, right? I am reporting that. I don't actually know if that's true. But, you got to make sure that Jonathan Allen isn't retiring. You asked Harrison Smith not to retire. Are you going to suddenly turn this into a development season? That's a bad locker room. You can't continue to sign these high-level free agents if you mislead previous free agents. If you treat them like that gets out, that gets around the league. Agents know about that. You can't do it. I think the way the Vikings, one of the reasons the Vikings have been so good about signing free agents is because they're a primary destination people want to go to. Now, obviously, the really excellent NFLPA grades are playing a role. Players have explicitly said that this has played a role. And players who have toured the Vikings facility and have talked to other Vikings players before signing have said that this is one of the best player environments they've been in. The difference Patrick Peterson experienced between the Cardinals organization, which at the time I think was 32nd or 31st, and this is when Dan Snyder owned Washington, right? And the Cardinals might have been worse than them. The experience he had from that to Minnesota was such a sea change, he couldn't even believe it, right? That's part of it. But another part of it is that they're competitive and that they don't really lie to their players, and that players feel like they've got a chance to win. And you can't really break that trust and hope that you can continue to sign these free agents and continue to re-sign these guys if they feel like that they were lied to about what the Vikings were trying to do. So you do have to win now. Now, is it better for the organization long term to develop a quarterback? In a vacuum, yeah, you should be comfortable with the losing season if it gives you the experience you need to develop this quarterback. But I think with all of these interrelated systems about retaining players, signing players long term, and this doesn't even account kind of the ethics of lying to players or doing wrong by them, right? Just from the perspective of kind of the long-term impact in the organization, not to mention stuff like winning culture, losing culture, or whatever, right? If you think that that's really important. And I think the longer I've spent covering the NFL, the more I feel like it does matter. I think outside of that vacuum with all these interrelated systems, obviously developing a quarterback is really important, but you need to create situations where the team feels competitive, because once you get out of that rut, it's really hard to get back in. I mean, the Vikings did that in 2013 or 2012, and it's been really difficult for them to get out of that rut. They finally did it in 2015, and they didn't even get good until 2017. It takes a while, and it's tough, and it takes a lot of movement. So I don't think that it's that they're over focusing on it, but I see why you would say that. And I understand that like long term, you do want to develop that quarterback and maybe punt on a season a little bit, but it's really tough to do that and then maintain a culture that keeps bringing players back.
Let's go off the rails. Also from Kenneth Allen, he asks, for Arif Sumo Corner,
Great.
Hoshuru won the Grand Sumo Tournament in London. Upon winning, he was given 2 trophies, a giant Kikoman bottle and a giant stuffed Hello Kitty.
Phenomenal.
Obviously, sumo is the superior sport, but what can the NFL give out to the Super Bowl winner to compete with that?
I don't think you can compete with that. That rules. I would be really curious about, like, you know, because the NFL used to play games in Tokyo for the America Bowl. Those were exhibition games. They didn't count for anything. But if you brought meaningful games back to Japan, what would they do? What would they see as, like, because, like, you give someone a giant bottle of soy sauce and a giant thing of Hello Kitty, you are saying something about the things you think that that person values about their culture, right? And you're not necessarily wrong, but you gotta make sure that if you're not right, you're at least not offensive. And I'm really curious what an organizer of a Tokyo Bowl or America Bowl or whatever would give the winner of the Super Bowl, or more appropriately, maybe the MVP of the Super Bowl, right? Because it would be given to an individual player. Because, like, you could go really wrong, right? Like if you gave them like a drumstick of fried chicken, that could go wrong insanely fast, right? Like, the optics of that are really bad. But if you live in another country, you might not know that. So, like, you have to be pretty careful. So what might be quintessentially American, which in a lot of senses fried chicken is, right? That feels like it's poking fun, but in a loving way, at a cultural export that's like been really important. Man, that one's pretty tough, especially because like some of the stuff that, you know, would hit really hard for players aren't necessarily American cultural products, even if they're important to American culture. Like, if you gave someone a Dragon Ball, everyone would be, not me, of course, but everyone else would be really happy with that. Really, really happy. That would rule for a lot of people, but that's obviously Japanese, right? And an American cultural product. James, can you come up with anything? I'm kind of blanking here. Like blue jeans are like the classic American thing, but I think that wouldn't work.
I'm sure the Taylor Swift could have a special release of her album that would just be, you know, available.
Oh,
to the
yeah,
players.
it's the whoever wins the MVP, their version, they get their own cover, right? Because the collectible covers.
Yep. There's like 30 of them or 50 of them, whatever.
Yeah, like a bunch of people have been buying all the covers, right? Which I mean, like, that's a choice. You could do that before you figure out whether or not the album was good, and you can live with the consequences. That's up to you.
Yeah. Let's go to DT, who asks, for Reef Sumo Mate in it corner. The sumo experience has been a big hit in London, especially seeing the Rikishis out being tourists. What do you think this means for the future of the sport internationally?
I don't know. Slight growth. Yeah, you got to do a lot, right? You got to do a lot of events, get people out there. And the thing about sumo is they traditionally only do an event every 2 months. Like, that's how it works. The
Minneapolis Boss Show is going to be amazing.
God, if they ever did that, 100% we would be there. There's no question about that.
Yes.
But yeah, you got to do more events, and that's a pretty difficult thing to do, and you're not going to get everybody over. But I think that would be, a pretty big part of it. I think the future of the sport internationally right now, there's not a ton there. Obviously, you know, you've got people in Mongolia, some people in Eastern Europe, some people in Polynesian islands that are pretty interested in doing it, and they appear in Japanese sumo. Which is cool. I love that. But I think growth beyond that has been limited and halting, and you need more events like the one in London, which seems like it was very, very successful. And so I applaud that. But right now, I don't think that there's much more room for growth until you keep doing stuff like that.
Next question is from Deez, who asks, for Reef's perfect storm corner, can you talk about the Etsy witch fueling the Mariners in the playoffs, and should they advance to the World Series, what sort of incantation would it take to stop a powerful demigod like Otani? Boy, Deez, I got bad news for you, bud.
Yeah. Magic runs out. It has costs. It has consequences. I got to be honest. I was hanging out with a bunch of people where only one of them is into sports. And because I was gone for 2 weeks internationally, they had no one to talk to about sports. And so I come back and they're like, oh my God, you're back. Let me talk about these things. We talked about the WNBA. We talked about gymnastics. We talked about football. And we talked about baseball. And I was like, oh, do you like have a team? And they're like, the Mariners. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, surely you know how this ends, right? Like you have to know how this ends. And they were like, yeah, but I mean, they're winning. I couldn't possibly be upset. And I was like, all right, we'll see. And because I said, we'll see, I needed them to lose. And so I'm sorry for everybody we had some people in the Discord who were like, man, Mariners aren't even my number one, number two team. And I feel really bad about this. I get you. That sucks. You got to cheer for like the Dodgers or the Blue Jays. That sucks, man. I feel for you. But personally, I needed them to lose so my take could be right. So, yeah. And also because they were being fueled by Etsy witches. And I just feel like for the purpose of the bit of the show, they had to run out. You had to lose because, as we've discussed, a lot of things can go wrong when you get witches off of Etsy to do stuff for you.
We've always said that, actually.
We've always said that. And also, Jezebel found that out really harshly pretty recently. I will not go into detail.
Yeah. There are some things in this life you don't pay for with money. Beef Brewski asks, for Arif's Judo Corner, judo struggles to gain traction in the U.S. despite strong judoka. Is it worth moving to the Winter Olympics where it could stand out as the sole grappling sport? How might the sport evolve to become a winter sport? The jackets have to help, right?
No. That's ridiculous. Winter sport? No. The problem from a growth perspective, in my opinion, as I've studied this a lot, right, is that judo is stuck in this really difficult spot with the popularity of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in its incorporation in the mixed martial arts, right? Because you have this grappling art, this grappling technique that has a ton of fanfare, that has a ton of money behind it, has a ton of marketing behind it. And it feels for a lot of people, especially people in the MMA world, that it is just superior to judo, which from the perspective of like a fan of a sport, that doesn't make sense to me. But I understand, like, if your goal is to like win a real world fight, then maybe BJJ is better for you than judo. And so that, which is a very, very valid perspective. But I think there's like an art to judo that looks cooler to me than BJJ. That's a personal subjective opinion, but you're stuck, right? Because of the popularity of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the popularity of other, or even just the more well-known striking martial arts like karate, right? So you're in a tough spot where it's difficult to grow the sport. And I don't know that you can kind of get there because even kind of the more famous practitioners like Ronda Rousey, right, is not known for her judo, right? Like we know that as a fighter, her bit wasn't striking. Like we know that, right? We know what she was strong and what she was weak at, but she wasn't known for her prowess in judo. She only became known for being good at judo when she became a mixed martial arts fighter. And so I don't know that there is a lot you can do, but I think that making that a winter sport is frankly ridiculous. I don't know, man. Like you need a movie that's like Ip Man, but for judo, right? Because have you seen Ip Man and Ip Man 2 and Ip Man 3 and Ip Man 4? Those movies rule. And you just need some Jeet Kune Do, but for judo type movie. You need a Bruce Lee of judo to just make a ton of movies about judo. That's the move, I think. Not winter Olympics. Come on.
You could fight outside. It'd be fun. Antitect asks, for James's relationship fantasy league corner, I'm going on a date next week. What is a good segue from small talk to asking if the other person is open to trade any players? What? I have a few positions I'm looking to improve before the deadline.
Are you dating someone in the same league as you? And are you dating them for the purpose of initiating trade discussions? Because, like, if so, I have to admit I kind of respect the hustle, but but like I just feel like if you're forging that very unique, specific, and ethically questionable path, that's when you have to forge on your own. No one's making maps for that one, buddy. They're not feeling good about making those maps. Like there's a million pickup artists out there who are bad at their jobs, but will at least try to tell you how you can close, and by that they mean something disgusting, right? But at least like they have a goal that a lot of people also have, and so they will teach you poorly about that goal. This one is so unique to me. But if I were to answer the question, if I were forced to answer this question, and again, I assume you're in the same fantasy league.
They're not in the same fantasy league. They're referring to last week's question about how you would score how you would score a relationship like a fantasy league.
So, okay, again, I refuse to acknowledge the way that you talk about this.
I am merely clarifying. I am not suggesting.
So, when I said you, I wasn't referring to you, James, of course.
Oh.
I was referring to you, my evil listeners, who ask awful questions about. So is this like a? So this is like just like a wife swap thing, kind of, but it doesn't have to be married, but like a date swap thing. Is that? Because that's not really thruple-ish, right?
No, it's more
we're
like
not
trying
in a
to
polycule situation, or are we trading polycule partners?
I think this is more about like a draft pick to be named later.
So how do you initiate discussions to? Okay,
yeah. Congratulations! It's 1:38 in the morning, and you have broken Arif's brain.
I don't. So this has to be a polycule situation, because you got a couple of positions that you're looking to improve. And okay, this is not a small talk to you. This is multiple dates, is what this is. A first date, small talk to trades. That's not happening.
Open with a joke. James Don Sharif asks, for Arif's Thruple Corner, the Thruple playoffs are coming up. What's your advice in order to win?
No, I don't. Because you're not supposed to win relationships.
The only way to win this situation is not to play.
That's right, Joshua.
Finally, it was James Don Sharif there, but yes.
Right, no, but Joshua is in war games where the
only
winning move is not. Come on.
Apologies. It's 1:39 in the morning. A second jet has hit. Drew Bledsoe asks the final question of the episode. For James's relationship corner, I recently had a friend from my university's board game club over at my apartment to watch some TV. Almost immediately, we were both cuddling and flirting with each other. It ended up feeling like a lovely date unexpectedly.
Oh.
Following the Hassan 3-step dating plan, trademark, what academic study should I replace with going to club, ensuring that I never see this person again? I'm an electronics tech student, if that helps.
Oh my God. Okay, I tell one story about screwing up a potential connection I have in a judo class, and now it's a whole... Okay, first of all, why did you spell Hassan with two N's? Or two S's? Two N's. That'd be weird too.
I know why I added 30 S's.
I know why you added 30, but like, why'd you spell Hassan with two S's? Second, I don't to just enjoy life and just see the person again. Don't join the debate team and never see anyone on campus on any weekend for the rest of your life. That is a bad idea. I guess the debaters behind us, after I graduated, they just started dating each other. So that's something, I guess. But that usually doesn't work, and it's a terrible idea. Yeah, I don't do that. Actually, that's my advice. What academic study? I mean, the robotics club. I don't know. You don't like have to travel for robotics. Like, you're not going to like Spokane, Washington, to go to the Gonzaga Robotics Club tournament, are you? You're not going to like Cambridge to the Harvard Invitational Robotics Club, right? So robotics club. That way they can come with you. I don't know. They're into board games. Surely that not a huge leap to get into robotics.
Board games are a great place to find people that you are interested in. Maybe try not to do what Arif has done in the past.
I do. Wonderful advice.
And with that is me, the end of this episode of Norse Code. We hope you have enjoyed it. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So over at Why Left Out Football, obviously I've got a recap of the Vikings-Eagles game if you want to read it. We have a really great piece about the defensive back factory that is the G5 School Toledo, written by Devin Jackson. And of course, a lot of people have given me a lot of great feedback on the piece I wrote about AI and its use in football analytics and Sumer Brain, which the research that I used in that was why I felt comfortable answering that question about AI in the NFL. So check those out over at Why Left Out Football. I might write a piece about if we can learn anything from a quarterback's first 2 starts. I don't know. We'll see. I've got some pieces kind of that I need to edit down the pipeline. But as always, a bunch of great stuff at Why Left Out Football.
So that is me for this episode of Norse Code. We hope you have enjoyed it. We'll be back likely on Thursday with a preview of the Chargers game. So look forward to that. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that the horrors persist. And so does Carson Wentz. And we will be back soon.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.